Here we go. Here we go. All right. I thought you had it turned on for me, and the fellowship was so loud. You guys were so talkative, I couldn't hear myself, so I thought I was on. That's good. Let's talk about the second half of Romans 12:10 tonight. Just a short verse that tells us to do a couple of things. Do you remember the first part of it from last week? It's on the introduction page. If you want to open your books up to the introduction page where it says listen, inside front cover. That's right. It says be devoted to one another in what? In brotherly love. Who wrote that? Apostle Paul wrote that. Okay. And this is the chapter where he transitions from some pretty heavy doctrine to some pretty heavy practical application. But it is a transitional point right here, and he says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. And then the second part of that's what we're going to look at tonight, and that's the word scramble. So the kids, adults, whoever has your booklets open, and we always scramble up the subject matter. That's in the second part. What is that in Romans 12:10b? What's the second command? Betty? Yes. Honor one another above yourselves. So the word scramble in the booklet would be what? Yep, good. Honor one another. So fill in the blanks then for that whole verse, right underneath that word scramble. Be what? Devoted to one another in love or brotherly love. The New King James has brotherly in there. And honor one another above yourselves. Okay, so one of the things we'll look at in our class tonight is, if I were to ask you in casual conversation on the street, what do you mean honor one another? How would you answer that, Anna? Respect. What else comes to mind? Nice. Blank's value. I assume that came right off the sheet. What do you think it means, Gene? Somebody's saying something. Did you say anything to answer? Okay. All right. What is the word you think that goes in that blank then? What does it mean to honor someone? To assign what? Value. Good job. I was kind of afraid to ask, actually. I didn't know what would come out, To assign violence to somebody or something like that. To assign value to someone or something, but since we're talking about people in this passage, it means to assign value to people. All right? We'll talk about why. We'll talk about how. We'll talk about what. All of those things in the next few minutes. Share some examples of things that we honor in our society or culture. What are some things that we honor? The flag. Yes, we do. We honor the flag. What else? Say it again. We honor veterans. Very good. Parents. Great. Our elderly. Very good. Government officials. Yeah, that's one of the things we'll study tonight, actually. Down here in the adult class, at least. What else do we honor or assign value to? The law or authority, right? Kelly? Our spouses, good. All right. So these are things that we think of pretty readily. And we think, well, we can honor things. There are things that are honorable. There are people who are honorable. Okay? And then there's this idea of honoring someone above yourself. It elevates the command a little bit. So what does it mean to honor someone above yourself? I'm down here where the blueprint is. 2 words, that is, the blueprint. And the first one says, honoring someone is good even if it does not cost you anything, you can value someone's position or achievement. Position meaning like as a parent, like honoring your mother and father or your spouse. You can honor someone's position or because of their position. Or you can honor someone's achievement. We can recognize something that somebody accomplished and value that with them. But you don't necessarily have to sacrifice anything, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's directly related to you. I remember when we all went to the airport and honored the honor flight that the veterans took. And when they came back to the airport, a bunch of us were there, and that was really neat. That didn't really cost us anything. I mean, we got in a car and drove over there, but we assigned great value to them, and it was no personal sacrifice for me to do that or anybody to do that, unless you gave up something to do it. And that might be the difference right there. Maybe there was something else on your schedule, and you said, I'd really like to be there when Cliff and Bob, I don't remember who else got off that plane from our congregation. You guys might have been the only two from our church, but there were hundreds, I think, with you, right? But somebody may have changed their plans, said, I can't do something else, or I value this above that. And that's kind of the idea where actually you're going to honor something and it costs you something, okay? You lay down something to give value to someone else. We talked about being devoted to one another. That's the idea of promoting someone else. And it's similar. A lot of these things overlap a little bit. But this is assigning value to someone above yourself. And it kind of reminds me of that passage in Philippians 2 where Paul said, concern yourselves with the needs of others above your own. Remember that in verses 3 and 4? That's the idea there of honoring or valuing someone above yourself. Where if it does come down to me and somebody else, that I would say, I'll value what you need or what you want above what I want or need. All right, so I'd like to spend some time in our classes talking about why, number one, why we can do that, and it's okay. It shouldn't feel like a sacrifice. We should be happy to do it. And what is our motivation to be able to do that? Like, what would motivate you to say, I would like to put other people before myself? That's really where it comes down to the crux of the matter of what may be different about Christians doing it versus those who are doing it just because they assign value to something. We have a little bit of motivation behind it too. So that leads to this question then: what must we understand and believe if we are to happily honor others above ourselves? How do you think that your Christian values would lead you to readily esteem or honor someone above yourself? Where does that come from? Humility. And let's keep walking down that road, okay? So humility, what makes you humble? What gives you humility to be able to do that? What's your motive? Anna? Yeah. Jesus' example as a servant. And he served us to the point of what? Death, Paul would say, even the death of the cross. Philippians 2, right after the passage I mentioned a little bit ago. Even the death of, like how far? It's as if Paul was anticipating you saying, how much is he willing to lay down for us? He was obedient to his Father, even to the point of death. That's how much then that you ought to concern yourselves with other people's needs, even above your own. That's all in that same context right there. All right, so last question. Let's jump down to this last one. I'll leave the other questions kind of redundant. Actually, the classes are going to bear that second to last question out a little bit. So I'll leave that one. But how did Jesus honor his disciples in John 13 as an example? What do you do there? Do you remember what happened in that text? And supper being ended, they sang a hymn and went out to the garden. Or before they went out, what did he do? Mm-hmm. He washed feet. Okay, that's a really good example of him for you, you know. And he's like, I got to teach you something about this. So the fact that he was about to go to his death and did that foot washing made it that much more powerful, really, especially in hindsight. So if you were the guys and you were around and you're having your feet washed, that's one thing. Peter was like, oh, no, don't do that, right? And he's like, no, I need to do this and I need to teach you about this. But then after the fact, maybe the following day or the day after, and you really would have, if they would have been thinking about that, they'd probably been, man, he was so much about us, and he was the one about to suffer that crucifixion. It just adds to that power of what he did there that night. So let's go talk about it a little more. I think some of our classes, the children are going to practice some of this honoring, and our teachers are ready to do that. Barry is somewhere, and he might have went back, but he's got some cards for Maggie and Traven. Should be back in his room, I think, already, setting up. And so let's do that. Let's have a prayer together, and we'll start dismissing our classes. Father in heaven, thank you for our time together tonight. We want to honor you and value you above all things. We don't want to chase idols, and we don't want to be deceived. We want to honor you for who you are, the life giver, the source of all joy. Help us to do that tonight, and help us to do that by honoring each other. Help us to learn how to do it, and tonight maybe more deeply consider how we can do that for one another. Thank you for Jesus and his example. It seems that we always come back to thanking you for his example. He came to show us who you were, and it is a beautiful thing. So we honor you, honor him, we honor your spirit, we honor your word tonight, and we honor each other, and help us to learn more deeply how to love with brotherly love and honor each other. In Jesus we pray. Amen. Have a good class, guys. The high school class keeps a little dish of candy back there, and we ran out last week, and I said, I got to remember to bring some candy back for these guys. Doesn't have to, but they enjoy it. And I forgot. And here the Traven and Maggie, who are talking with them tonight, they came in with a big bag of Kit Kat bars. So they covered me. Back there in the high school class. Takes a bigger money tree to provide candy for this class. Okay, everybody. Let's dig in a little bit more. Good old-fashioned study tonight. Just one of those deals where we just laid out all these verses where it talks about honoring. And we're going to study through these and see if we can really excel in our Christian walk with one another. Take a look at Psalm 8, verses 3 through 5 first. Psalm 8, verses 3 through 5. What is one way Jesus has honored us in this passage? Yeah, don't you love that? For you have made him, that is man, a little lower than the angels, and you've crowned him with glory and honor. That's verse 5. So when he's considering all of the universe, the stars and the sun and the moon, and he thinks about man, he's probably thinking how little we are, when you start thinking about the expanse of the sky, you say, wow, I'm really pretty small. So what is man that you would consider him? And you've honored him in this way. You've crowned him with glory by making him in your image. But he says, you've also honored us. You've assigned great value to us. That's one place it's used. Where Jesus Christ, the Word who was in the beginning with God and through whom all things were made, played this role in just saying, I value greatly who you are. All right? Let's go over to Philippians Chapter 2, just so you can see this. We've talked about it a little bit tonight, but we're going to do a lot of flipping in the passages tonight. But I want to encourage you to take some notes. There's some space there to take some notes, especially when you get down to some of these ones that really pertain to you. Whether you have a spouse or we're talking about honoring those in authority. Some of us chuckle a little bit like, that's hard sometimes, but we're going to talk about that. I want you to take a few notes that come to mind from what we discover together as a class. All right? Philippians 2, 5 through 9. Paul says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but he made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Therefore God has also highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name. So get this in your mind, like Jesus comes, he is greater than the angels, right? And he comes and makes himself lower than the angels. The Hebrew letter actually quoted Psalm 8 and said that's what Jesus did. He made himself a man, like he became man, so he made himself lower than the angels so that he could value us above himself. All right, hold that thought. Now, here we see that because he did that, the Father honored him and exalted him to the right hand of God and valued him, gave him glory and honor for what he did for us. So when it comes down to you thinking about, can I honor people in this world? We tend to think, I think, maybe I'm speaking for myself more than you, but we tend to honor people who deserve honor, in our opinion. It's kind of like respect. It's that question like, well, we should respect certain people. And like, well, if they're not respectable, can you respect them? You know, it's a similar thought. And I want to encourage you to look at what God says to do regardless, in many cases, regardless of what someone says, does, what you think of them, or whatever, because, go back to Psalm 8, God has crowned every man with glory and honor. He's crowned every man with glory and honor. And so he's going to ask us to practice that. And not just have a measure where we say, well, let me see if I think they're worthy of it. He's going to ask us to practice that, just like with respect. It's sometimes you say, well, that person's just not worthy of respect. You know, they didn't deserve it. They don't earn respect. But there's this sense we're getting called back to that because someone is a human being, created in God's image, and he actually wants them to come back to him, that he wants us to practice putting those people too above ourselves. That's how we'll show them who God is. So we have to think about this more objectively than subjective, like I'll honor who I want to honor. I'll honor who I think deserves my honor. If somebody hurts me or something like that, I'm just not going to honor them. Like God will check us back on that tonight. He's going to check us down on that. All right? Any thoughts or questions before we start into the list? Okay, go to Romans 12:5. So we're right in the ballpark here of Romans 12:10, right? Go to Romans 12:5. Remember what is in verses 1 and 2. Take a glance at that. We talked about that maybe, 2 months ago from the pulpit. And then we know it's in Romans 12:10. That's our study for tonight. So right here in the middle where he's going from, or he's teaching us how to sacrifice ourselves. He says, so we, being many, oh no, what did I do? Well, that's not the right passage. Well, I'm reading the right passage. That's not the one I want. The one I want, does somebody want to look it up for me real quick? Honor those who work what is good. I think I got a typo right on the very first one. Somebody got a little word search they can do? I'm not going to pull my phone out and do that. But the passage I'm looking for says, to give honor to those who work what is good. I think, Karen, I left that in there from the previous week. We're members of one another. So we found a typo. Anybody find that where it says honor those? Romans 2:10. Okay. Thanks, Luke. That sounds right. Very good. That's the one. All right, that sentence starts clear back in verse 5. And Paul does one of his things where he's running down through here talking about God's not partial. And in that, he's saying that those who obey him, he will give glory, honor, and peace to everyone who works what is good. He will honor those who work what is good. You remember Ephesians 2:10, we're his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, that we should walk in those works, which he created beforehand for us to walk in. That's what he wants us to be moving toward, is the way God made me, he intended for me to walk in good works, to do good works. He wants me to get back to that. So he wants me to leave sin, turn from sin, live a life repenting of sin, turning back to him, and learning how to do good works. In this passage, it says that God will honor those who do what is good, who work what is good. So we'll see that we're going to honor people that do what is good as well, right? All right, let's go to the next one. I messed that one up. Romans 13:7. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes, customs to whom customs, fear to whom fear, and honor to whom honor is due. So we're going to look at honoring people to whom honor is due. All right? There are certain people that have position or have accomplished something where they are worthy of us honoring, and he says if somebody has done something like this, then you need to honor that. What is good, basically, right? I mean, that's essentially, that kind of ties into Romans 2:10, what we just looked at, where you want to honor somebody for that which they did that is good, and they're due giving honor to. Okay? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. The office of the president or other dignitaries. We'll see that down here when we look at Peter's letters, where he talks about that. That's why I said it's going to be good for us to practice this when we don't agree with people who are in offices that run our country or that are overseeing our church or running schools where our children go, all these places where there's authorities. We're going to need to learn how to do that tonight. Andy? Okay. Yeah. Andy said, I'm trying to remember to repeat it for people that are in the online. Andy said this would be more like when somebody's honored with a medal of honor for some achievement. That's the idea here too. So it's due them. They've achieved it or earned it. And he said, give honor to people that do that. So actually, go ahead and do that. Gary?
This particular Greek word in Strong's, it means a valued
Yes. Um, the word honor carries this idea of actually monetary value, but when it's used toward people, you just carry that idea over and say they're worth something. Just like we value things, like we should value people like that. Place value on them. Thank you. Any other comments? Let's look at the next one then. Ephesians 6:2. All right. What's that say? Okay. It's the first commandment with a promise that it may be well with you and live long on the earth. All right. Let me ask you this. How long do you need to honor your mother and father? Just till you're out of the house? What do you think? Yeah. To death, right? Either you or them first. You honor them the whole time that you have that relationship with them. And you can honor them after death. That's a very good point. You can continue to honor them, right? So, let me ask you why it's important to honor your parents. Why do you think it's important to honor your parents? Betty, go ahead again. Yes, they're the way that we model honoring authority, aren't they? Our very first authority in our life is our mother and father. So as we grow through the years and we honor them, we're showing respect, and we learn how to honor God when we do that. So he says, did you see where in the first verse it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right, and then honor them? You honor them through obedience, don't you? And there's a certain point, of course, where you leave father and mother and cleave to your wife, and right, you don't obey your parents your whole life in that sense. Maybe it shifts more to honoring them where you value their needs, right? And they understand that you become an adult and they don't just tell you what to do all the time. Is that right? That doesn't always happen, that transition. But thank you, Josh. Yep. Josh said that we carry the name of our parents with us for at least a time, and the way we conduct ourselves and our character honors our father or mother's name. It's great. Somebody else had something. Gene?
To me, it sort of goes back to the first page you were talking about. There's an element, a great element of sacrifice, big sacrifice for us. To me, we should honor them by providing that same sacrificial help.
Yeah. Do you know something about that, Gene? Just a little bit, right? So later in life, it might come to the point where you honor them by caring for them like they were caring for you, maybe even to the point as a child, right? Taking full care of them, or at least overseeing the care of that parent. And so that's one way we can honor them. And that is not only good in the sight of God, also in 1 Timothy 5, Paul talks about taking care of those of your own household well, that's important to God. Paul just said, because it's good and right to do. So taking in family like that, especially your own parents and your own children, and taking really good care of them is something that God respects and honors in us to do. But the family is where we learn all these dynamics of how to honor people, especially because we fight in families, We don't always get along, and so you learn to honor, even if you don't agree with mom and dad, and or they ground a child. That child has to learn what it means to honor them, even though they may not agree with it. And we need to learn in our marriages how to honor one another, even if we don't agree on something. You know, we don't just throw honor out the window over a disagreement. We still approach each other and view each other as having great value. So we can continue to relate to one another with honor in our families and work that out. And then, like so many things, we bring that over into the church relationships that we have with one another. And God says, you know, or Jesus said, for example, these are my mothers and brothers and sisters here. And he basically just made a spiritual application of all that and said, so you honor one another and assign great value to one another. Even if you don't know each other well, even if you have different personalities, you don't get along well or whatever, he's like, hey, it's church family. It's a family. There's all that messiness in there, but you still value one another because of two things. God values each person, so you don't have the right to devalue somebody. And we're trying to build one another. So I don't just kind of sit back and say, what do you all have for me so I can grow? I mean, he's called me to come out and say, well, I would expect that all of us have faults. I expect that all of us are not fully mature Christians, right? So I'm supposed to bring something to the table and learn how to honor and value you in a way that gives you confidence, gives you, you know, more spiritual maturity and more hope and so forth. All right? All right. Let's work down through this a little bit. You've got this to take home with you, so let's pick and choose. We've just got a few minutes. I mentioned widows in there. Oh, well, let's talk about 1 Thessalonians 4:4 for a second. Read that. Flip over there and read that. 1 Thessalonians 4:4. You want to read it out loud, Gunny? Well, I'm sorry, I thought you were. Go 3 and 4 then. Verses 3 and 4.
3 and 4?
Mm-hmm.
For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor.
All right. That's not hard to understand, is it? That we would look at our own vessel or our own body, where the Spirit dwells in us, and that context bears that out on down further a little bit, that we belong to the Spirit of